Chronicles of a Play Therapist podcast is raw, unfiltered, and unapologetic, discussing mental health from a play therapy specialization, including trends, treatment approaches and techniques, theory, and the business of psychotherapy practice. Get ready to learn and play with your host, licensed clinical social worker and registered play therapist supervisor, Althea T. Simpson.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of Chronicles of a Play Therapist podcast. I am your host, Althea T. Simpson, licensed clinical social worker and registered play therapist supervisor. I am the founder of Unicorn Life Play Therapy Training and Brighter Day Therapeutic Solutions, which is a trauma-focused psychotherapy practice in Northern Virginia. Today's topic is all about using bibliotherapy to facilitate the healing process or just to teach skills to children in play therapy and using bibliotherapy. I am super excited about bibliotherapy because I absolutely love it, just like I love play therapy. But bibliotherapy, I absolutely love bibliotherapy. I was introduced to bibliotherapy early in my play therapy career when I was in supervision, and I would go in and I would say to my supervisor, like, hey, we processing cases. And of course, she was a licensed professional counselor. And so I just want to go ahead and note that I wasn't just willy-nilly talking about clients. I had permission or consent from the adult, who is the parent or the caregiver, and also assent from the child. Now, children under the age of 18 cannot give consent. They give assent. And that's important to know, especially when you are in supervision or consultation for various certifications in the mental health field. But I would talk about these cases that I needed help with in the process. And she always had a book. And I used to be so excited leaving her office, and so I can go and order the books that she showed me or talked about. And so, but about a year ago, I decided to create my own bibliotherapy presentation because she has a bibliotherapy presentation that she's done locally in the Virginia area, but also nationally at the Association for Play Therapy National Conference. So let me just tell you a little bit about bibliotherapy for those who may be new to bibliotherapy. It is a therapeutic technique that incorporates books, pretty much any literature, depending on your creativity, into play therapy sessions with children, adolescents, adults, families, and I even incorporate bibliotherapy with couples. So utilizing storytelling through the use of fiction and nonfiction books can be very therapeutic and symbolizing nurturing, depending on how you incorporate it. And so the way I incorporate nurturing and bibliotherapy is by introducing food during the therapeutic process. And I'll talk a little bit about that. But bibliotherapy is adaptable and it can be used by mental health professionals and parents and educators to help children, but specifically mental health professionals and parents to help children improve social, emotional, and behavioral functioning. You can also incorporate poetry, plays, short stories, and self-help materials into bibliotherapy sessions. Self-help materials is really good I find that to be more useful when I use bibliotherapy with adolescents and adults, but certainly you can modify it for children if it's applicable. And so let me just give you a quick history about bibliotherapy. A quick history lesson, because when I decided to create my own bibliotherapy training about a year ago to incorporate some of my favorite books into the training, I did some research. And what I found out was bibliotherapy was originally or officially birthed in like 1966 by the American Library Association. And so the Association of Poetry Therapy was formed in 1969 and brought us poetry therapy. And then they decided that they would include it as a form of bibliotherapy to be used as a treatment modality. And so then, fast forward Some years later, bibliotherapy was classified into two categories: developmental for educational environments and therapeutic for mental health spaces. So the most common use bibliotherapy for me is using stories, fiction or nonfiction, books that have characters with similar issues to the clients. And this will help the client or the child to develop a deeper understanding of their problems and their concerns, their fears, their anxieties, their worries. It can also help them to make a connection to what they're feeling, thinking, or experiencing. So bibliotherapy can also serve as letting clients know or letting children know that someone else has gone through this or something similar to what they have experienced or what they're going through right now. And so a lot of the issues that clients bring to therapy, such as grief, depression, anxiety, stress, and trauma, can be difficult to talk about, especially if they're ashamed that it's happening to them or they feel that they should be strong enough to handle. So, but whatever it is that's preventing them from being able to communicate this verbally, play therapy and bibliotherapy can help for trauma, specifically for trauma, because bibliotherapy can be used with a lot of different concerns and issues. But specifically for trauma, I prefer to use books that has animal characters instead of human-like characters. And you may be wondering why. So let me just go ahead and let you in on it. The animal type characters allows the child to put some distance between them and the trauma. And even with sand tray, when I incorporate sand tray into my play therapy sessions, I have a lot of miniatures that are animal groups of families and, you know, different size houses or dragons. Well, I absolutely love dragons. I have an amazing dragon collection. I absolutely love dragons, and I know that they're animals, but I separate them out because those are my favorite miniatures. But I also have people like characters. And what I found over the years is that children who have been traumatized, they tend to not go to those human figures, and because it puts too much resemblance to their issues. As they work through their trauma and the experiences that they had, they begin to facilitate change so using that is kind of fictitious for them. They don't have to connect their real life experiences to what they're doing. And so they're having their own process, their internal process, of healing. But as the child begins to facilitate change on a fictitious level, they can usually gain the courage and ability to recognize that these same changes can be made in their own life. And so that's the great thing about play therapy. Did I mention I absolutely love play therapy? Okay, so I absolutely love play therapy. And for that reason, it helps them to facilitate change and make connections to their own life, but in their own time and on their terms. So when you're choosing books, they don't have to be therapeutic books. Although those are great to have in your collection, some general books will do the work too. And I'm gonna give you an example of that. I really, really like Jamie Lee Curtis's book, Where Do Balloons Go? And this is a book that's about a little boy letting go of a balloon, and then his imagination takes him on a journey, right? So if I wanted to use that book therapeutically, in a therapeutic setting, I would use it for grief and loss. Like, where you think your loved one, where did they go? Helping them to process through death and life, grief and loss, because that's a part of life, right? Or even for behavioral modification, by saying something like, if you put your feelings or problems in a balloon and you released it, where do you think they would go? How do you think you would feel once these problems or these negative feelings are gone? So you can still use general books with creativity. It just takes the creativity and thinking about and really being conscious and aware of why I'm picking this book, right? Now, here's the really good part. I'm going to tell you why or how I use 3 specific books in play therapy practice with children and tweens. Because, sometimes you have that age that they're not quite kids, but they're not teenagers either. And I've used children's books with teens and adults. And I'm going to tell you how I did that. By saying something like, this book may seem a little kiddie. It may even seem childish, but let's just see if you can catch on to why, or I want to use this book in your session. Now, I have some teens and adults that will give me a side eye. They'll even roll their eyes at me. That's okay. I would say something like, if you don't like it, we can stop. Let's see if you could just catch on to it. So then I ask, is it okay for me to read it? So, is it okay if I read it? And if they say yes, then I move forward. If not, I put the book down, but I'm pretty well versed on the books that I use and why I want to use it with a particular client. So I already know the storyline. So I'm introducing that into the session anyway. So it's about the creativity. But they usually get curious. These adults and these teens usually get curious about why I want to read this kiddie book to them, right? And then boom, I got them. I'm using these children's books to identify feelings and emotions and problem solve with teens and adults. It's all about the mental health professional's creativity skills. And let's not forget, the relationship that you have with your clients will allow you to introduce things even that they may be wondering why or have question marks about. That relationship that they have with you will get them to trust that, okay, this may be beneficial for me. Because remember, the relationship and the trust in a relationship is not about the space, the actual space or the environment that you're in. The trust in a relationship and the safety in a relationship with your client is about the therapist and the client, not the space. So if you create trust and safety, you can introduce some of these things that can be beneficial to your clients to help them, whatever they're coming into session or coming to therapy for. So it really is about relationship too, especially when you're working with teens and adults to try to get them to do some of the creative-based activities. But not all children want to do play therapy. So there have been times I had to get creative with them, to use play therapy or creative-based activities, expressive therapies, even with children. So again, it goes back to the relationship, right? So if my clients didn't trust me or they didn't feel safe with me, I probably would not be able to try a lot of the creative things that pop into my head to use in therapy with them. So I want to tell you about the books, 3 books that I go to. When I couldn't get over it, I learned to start acting differently. Now, this is a book that is specific to sadness. It's a story about managing sadness. So it's mild to moderate depression. You can use it for bullying. You can use it for negative self-talk. You can even use it for academic issues. That's just a few things that you can use it for. But again, it's about the mental health professional's creativity and why you are choosing books. So when I couldn't get over it, I learned to start acting differently. One of the sentences here is like, anyway, you heard me right. Me, a 4th grade boy, cried right in front of the other kids. I thought my life was ruined. How would you use that with a kid? I like to stop and ask questions when I'm reading stories. Now, and I have some little humans that we call children that will roll their eyes at me and say, can you just read the story, right? But so when I can throw it in, I ask questions. So I would ask questions about what I just read, like, oh my, has there ever been a time where you wanted to cry and you didn't feel like you could cry, or you cried and what happened? Or have you ever thought that your life was ruined? Tell me about that, right? So that's how you can use bibliotherapy and the processing of child's experiences Now, double dip feelings. Book number 2, double dip feelings. This is my all-time favorite non-trauma book to use in therapy. And I use this again with children. This is one of the books that I use with all clients, like across the lifespan, because sometimes clients have conflicting emotions and they don't know what to do with them, or they think that, it's not appropriate. And if I think back to, let's say if a child is witnessing domestic violence and they're feeling anger and love at the same time, they angry at their parent or caregiver or the abuser for what they're doing, but they still love them too. So Double Dip Feelings is a great book for situations like that. It helps children to understand conflicting emotions. It normalizes their feelings. It is so important for us to normalize the feelings of clients, no matter the age, when they present in therapeutic spaces, to let them know that it's okay how you feel, good, bad, ugly, or indifferent. Those are your feelings and they're okay. But then you have to go, depending on the situation, doing a little bit more processing and, helping them manage those things. But using activities, a couple activities that I use with double dip feelings is like popsicle sticks or plastic eggs to show different feelings on each side. So you use feeling words or you draw feeling faces on both sides that represent those conflicting feelings or emotions. And the plastic eggs, let me just give you a tip. I have tons of plastic eggs because sometimes we may crush them. Like, what would you do how would you feel if we crushed those feelings or we stomped on those emotions and they crack and I got to toss them in the trash? But that's why I only purchase them in bulk when they go on sale after Easter. And I have all kinds of colorful eggs, some with glitter, some without glitter. How does your feeling shine? Whatever I make up at the time. Again, it's about creativity. Use your creativity. Don't be afraid to trust your instinct or your gut. That's the one question that I get from a lot of people who reach out to me about the creativity that I use in my sessions and how can they be more creative. Trust your gut. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. I've had to repair and apologize because I'll get a thought in my head and like, oh my God, this is going to be an amazing activity. And no, it's a flop. And the person looking at me like, what was this that you just had me do? And I have to apologize. I'm honest. And I'm like, well, it seemed better in my head, but I see now that I still need to work on developing this out. The way it came out was not how I saw it going in my head. And it's okay to apologize. We're human, right? What we do is not an exact science. It's not exact, but being authentic and honest with your clients, that's what make the experience like, they look at you like, okay, let's move on. And then we just have to move on. But I also use Legos to build, build 2 models that represent conflicting feelings that you're having. So Double Dip Feelings, all-time favorite. I think that was like the best book. And Beautiful Oops. I'm sorry, I just threw that in because I just thought about Beautiful Oops. So those are the 2 best all-time non-trauma books that I was introduced to by my play therapy supervisor when I was under supervision to become credentialed as a registered play therapist supervisor. Elliot. Now, this is a population. Elliot is for a population that's near and dear to my heart, right? I primarily work with children and families that's involved in the foster care system. And so Elliot helps kids navigate the foster care system. It explains in words why parents or caregivers may not be able to care for a child, and focuses on the emotional experiences of that child. And so that's why I absolutely love Elliot. And again, my play therapy supervisor introduced me to Elliot, and she was like, I got the perfect book for you for your foster care cases. And so but one of the things that I do, and I like doing activities after I read the books, and sometimes it may take us a couple weeks to read the same book, depending on how the child is responding to the content that's in the book or the storyline. So I'm observing them as I'm reading. And sometimes I have children that want to read the book to me. Okay, cool. Read the book to me, but I'm observing them. And when they stop or they're having difficulty, I will stop and then we will hit the reset button and do an activity. So I always have activities based on the problems or the issues that's in the book that we can kind of work out. And then I also, Colors of My Heart is one of my all-time favorite activities, basic play therapy activity that's so powerful. I can always throw that in, right? So, but you can create with Elliot, you can create a life book or a timeline related to different emotions and experiences that the child had. I have an activity that I haven't really built out yet, but it just popped into my head. So a lot of the activities that I do, and people ask me about the instructions for the activity. I don't have instructions because it's just something that popped into my head. And when I use it, I almost use it differently every time, even with the same kid, because it's something that just popped into my head. I build a road between two houses, then explore the process, the child's feelings about going between two houses, especially when it's time for reunification. They've achieved the level of reunification, working toward unification, and children start going back to their biological family on the weekends or spending the week there, but they go back to their foster home. So that's an activity that I use with them to explore and process. How is this making you feel? The processing completely depends on the situation, the child, and the purpose of selecting a particular book. But with children, especially doing trauma and using bibliotherapy for trauma, sometimes my processing would go like, so what do you think about the book we just read? And then what do you think about creating a sand tray or a Lego model about what happened to you or what happened to the character in the book? Or maybe do a drawing. And I also use I wonder statements. I wonder what would show up in a sand tray if you or we created our world in the sand. And if it is a trauma case, I may even do a trauma narrative in the sand or a picture trauma narrative. It depends on the kid and the situation. But what is important to know is that if they say yes to moving forward to an activity about their experiences or even the experiences of the characters in the book, you don't want to interrupt them because this would, interrupt their flow or their creativity. It may even make it harder for them to focus on the experience, and they may start avoiding describing, the details of what happened. So you want to give them their space to create if you are coupling bibliotherapy with a physical activity instead of just processing with words. So, and just as with any activities or exercises that we use in therapeutic spaces, we must be intentional about why we are using them. So being intentional, that's important, not just playing. I know there are a lot of people who say, oh, I do play therapy. There's a difference between playing in therapy and utilizing play therapy. So you want to make sure that you're intentional about why you're choosing books, what books you choose, or even activities. So the books that you choose should be related to or relevant to the child's symptoms or behaviors. If a client or a child is being bullied in school, then books specific to bullying is good, but you can also grab books that's related to anger. Those may be useful as well. You should also ensure that you're selecting books where the main character solves the problem. Because trust me, if you don't, you have little humans called children with no chill and say just anything out their mouth, they will let you know that that character still don't know what to do, or they still have that problem and don't know how to fix it or what's wrong. Trust me, I know. So if the book doesn't solve a problem, then it's a good idea to follow it up with an activity related to the storyline where you and the child can solve the problem. I remember the first time that happened to me. It threw me off guard because this little human had no chill and anything just blurted out their mouth. And the only thing, and so because I provide snacks to my clients if they want them after school, and I've been doing this since forever, because when I learned that kids eat lunch at 10:30, 11 o'clock, and then they come in to see me after school 4 or 5 o'clock and hadn't had anything to eat, and to each his own, because I know some therapists don't like snacks in their playroom or their spaces. This space, my whole space, my office environment is for my clients. So I was intentional about the type of furniture, the type of rugs and everything that I put in my space because this is about them, right? So I don't care if they eat. And most of the time, if they hungry and if they anything like me, I ain't really paying attention to anybody anyway if I'm hungry. So that's why I provide snacks, and I don't care if they eat snacks. But if we're doing something like sand tray or Legos, we'll do the snack before or after and like with bibliotherapy, we'll do it before or after. But this particular time, I was caught off guard. And the only thing that I can say was, yeah, are you ready for your juice box and your chips? That was the only thing that could come out of my mouth. I was so thrown off by what was said to me. But that also gave me a few minutes to think about what type of activity I can come up with to help the main character solve the problem with the child, right? So what we do is not exact. We have some fumbles. God knows I've had fumbles throughout my career. I've been working with children and families since 2004, and I still make fumbles, right? I learn from them. I look at them as teachable moments. I learn from my clients. I learn from those other mental health professionals that I train, right? Just as much as they learn from me. So we make fumbles and it's okay, but always be authentic about it. Own up to it. I'm always authentic, and you should be too, especially when working with kids and teens, because if I'm keeping it real, if you're not authentic with them, they're going to smell it and they can use that to manipulate the therapeutic process. So always be you. Show up your authentic self. Even in how you dress, show up as your authentic self because they will hone in on it. But bibliotherapy is used as an adjunct to treatment to meet treatment goals and facilitate the healing process. So when choosing the books, again, for bibliotherapy sessions, make sure that they provide some sort of information, psychoeducation, support, or guidance to help clients through their problems or concerns that's bringing them to treatment. Mental health professionals can use bibliotherapy. We need training, right? Just like with play therapy, just like with cognitive behavioral therapy, just like with, any other treatment modality, we have to have appropriate training and knowledge. So you can formally use it if you want to get trained. You don't have to be formally trained. You have to have the knowledge to use bibliotherapy. But if you formally want to be trained, just visit the International Federation of Bibliopoetry Therapy for the qualifications to become certified applied poetry facilitator, which bibliotherapy falls under that. They have a credentialing for pre-licensed mental health professionals, and they have a credentialing for licensed clinical professionals, kind of like play therapy. And all of their levels require supervision. So it looks like their process is kind of like becoming a registered play therapist, a school-based registered play therapist, or a registered play therapist supervisor like myself. So I hope this information has been helpful. I know I did some fumbles and I went off on some tangents, but that's just me, right? I like telling stories in therapy and training. It's just who I am. So, but thank you for listening to this informational session of Chronicles of a Play Therapist podcast. I am your host, Althea T. Simpson. Thanks for playing, and until the next time, play well.
Chronicles of a Play Therapist is sponsored by Unicorn Life Play Therapy Academy, where play therapy is magical. Thanks for listening, and don't forget to subscribe in your favorite podcast app and follow us on YouTube. Chronicles of a Play Therapist is intellectual property of Althea T. Simpson. All rights reserved.